Well, let's get some analysis on the programme now about the extraordinary scenes we've witnessed in Venezuela and, as I say, today as well in New York. Tiziano Breda is with me now. He's a senior analyst for Latin America and the Caribbean at the conflict NGO ACLED. Really good as well to speak to you today on France 24.
Thank you for the invitation, Nadia. It's a pleasure.
Let's talk first of all, if we can, about Delcy Rodriguez. She is supposed to be sworn in today, as we were hearing, as the kind of new president now of Venezuela. And it does strike me that her position is quite extraordinary. I mean, I can't think of another politician in modern times who's faced a situation like hers. She has pledged loyalty to Nicolas Maduro, but we now have Donald Trump threatening her pretty directly. She's then talked about the need to be respectful towards the United States. So my question to you is she in charge of Venezuela today, or is she a puppet of the Americans?
Well, you touched on a very crucial point, Nadia, because in effect, the ousting of Maduro, or the extraction of Maduro, has left Delcy Rodriguez in a very tricky position in which she has to balance a sort of opening in a way, or at least not directly belligerent attitude towards the United States and the requests, fearing that this could lead to possible second action, as Trump actually warned, that would be the consequence of it. And on the other hand, she needs to maintain a sort of an attitude, or project an image, rather, that is loyal to the Chavistas' sort of principles, and still recognize the figure of Maduro in order to keep the Chavista ranks in line, right, and aligned with her. So far, she's received the blessing of the military, particularly in the figure of Vladimir Padrino Lopez, the Minister of Defense. But I'm not sure how we should be able to sort of juggle these two very different sort of attitudes to both remain in power and keep the situation in the country stable.
And you mentioned there that Rodriguez has received, for the moment, apparent support from key figures within the army. Do you think it is likely, then, that the army will continue to remain loyal to Rodriguez? Just explain to us sort of the key role that the military is playing at the moment.
Yeah, there are multiple, actually, sort of branches or armed branches of Chavismo and allies that can play a role in this transition, and can actually play a role of resistance in the case in which Delcy Rodriguez was become to be perceived sort of too much aligned or too lenient towards the US. Because the military has been, of course, one of the institutions that have benefited the most from the power structure that Hugo Chavez, himself a military officer, and Maduro after him had put in place, in which there's a strong role in different areas of the society that is carried out by the military, and that can also sort of benefit from a series of activities, including the extraction of gold and some also the participation in some other illicit activities. So changing that, if Delcy Rodriguez was to change this sort of alter this equilibrium, then it's likely to see that some branches of this institution could sort of rebel, or at least reject this change of posture. And also, but it's not the only armed actor, the military in this case. There's also pro-government colectivos, sort of mobs, that have acted and have played a critical role in suppressing the opposition and dissent in previous years, particularly after sort of disputed elections. But also even Colombian rebel groups that are active in parts of the country, particularly the ELN, that have pledged to defend the Bolivarian revolution with their arms.
Yeah, I was going to mention that as well, actually, that there are these other armed groups that play a role in Venezuela. And then, of course, there is the Venezuelan opposition. We were hearing there from our correspondent that the streets of Caracas are pretty quiet. We haven't seen demonstrations by the opposition over the past couple of days yet. What's What's your sense of that? Do you think that we will see civil unrest, protest to come, given the fact that Maduro is out the country, but the rest of his regime remains in place?
That's a very interesting question. And actually, I mean, so far in ACLED, we've only recorded a couple of protests, but actually in favor of Maduro, sort of against the military operation that was carried out on Saturday. I guess there are at least a couple of elements that help explain why the situation remains in a tense calm as of now in the country. The first being that the immediate response of the government and the armed forces has been to declare a state of emergency, rhetorically, call for calm, for patience, but also at the same time deploying part of the military in certain areas to contain preventively, any possible sort of eruption of unrest. And on the other hand, you have the uncertainty. I mean, I'm sure that many Venezuelans, particularly those abroad, but probably also in the country, will have welcomed, the removal from power of Maduro, but not necessarily, even though not necessarily in the way in which it was done. But at the same time, they're not certain that this would necessarily lead to a democratic transition. And actually, the words from the Trump administration and the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, do not seem to go actually in that direction. So probably removing Maduro, but becoming aware that this will not change much in the overall political system in the country may also explain why, as of now, we haven't seen any particularly action at the social level to try and sort of change things in the country.
And just a final thought from you. I mean, one of the more jaw-dropping statements by Donald Trump over the past couple of days is the idea that the United States effectively now rules Venezuela, in his words. The United States, though, look, maybe they've learnt the lessons from Iraq. We haven't heard them talking about the idea of the occupation of Venezuela. But how might the United States rule, in Donald Trump's words, Venezuela without boots on the ground?
That's actually a very difficult scenarios to see. The U.S. can impose totally the rule and political preferences and sort of force their way through in the country without an actual military presence. Of course, the threat of further military action remains there, and it's certainly and the Trump administration, has demonstrated that it's not an empty threat, that it's willing to use the Navy assets that have been deployed in the Caribbean for a different amount of purposes. And the pressure on the oil trade is still there, even though already some oil tankers appear to have been able to evade that blockade imposed by the US a few weeks ago. At the same time, it's hard to see a scenario in which the Trump administration can fully impose its will on the Venezuelan government, particularly if the Venezuelan government remains composed of the same figures that used to run the country, just without Maduro.
Tiziano Breda talking to us there from ACLED. Really interesting to get your analysis today. Thanks very much.
Thanks to you.